Everyone knows Excalibur is King Arthur's famous sword, but did you know it wasn't his first magic sword? Not only King Arthur, but other warriors also have magic swords in his legends. Join me as I share the story of the 4 magic swords from King Arthur's legends. The first sword of King Arthur is the famous sword in the stone, which, as I'm going to tell you here, is not exactly Excalibur. Hey, watch my foot, man, watch my foot. I'm serious. Oh yeah, the sword in the stone of King Arthur is not exactly Excalibur, as I'm going to explain to you here. Anyway, this sword has a lot to do with King Arthur because it was created by Merlin for him, and actually, King Arthur himself was raised by Merlin because he found out that Uther Pendragon was literally feeling sick because he wanted to be with a married woman in this case, the wife of the Duke of Cornwall. I swear to God, that's really his name. I'm not joking. All of this happened because Uther Pendragon had invited the Duke of Cornwall to a party. At this party, he hit on Igraine. Since Igraine was married to the Duke, she told him what happened, and they left the place. But then, King Uther Pendragon ended up starting a war because Igraine and the Duke of Cornwall left in the middle of the war. King Uther Pendragon couldn't stand waiting to see Igraine and got sick because of it. And then, his warriors went to get help and found Merlin, who showed up at the cheater's bedside and said he could help him get what he wanted, which in this case would be to violate the sacred bond of marriage between the Duke of Cornwall and Igraine. In other words, Merlin is basically Satan here, and he's so much like Satan that in this case, Merlin. He told Uther that this would cost him something dear, but Uther didn't care, right? He was all fired up and ended up accepting it anyway. When he asked what it would cost him, Merlin said it would cost him his firstborn, the couple's first child. Unlike you, who's watching me right now, for whom it wouldn't cost anything. Liking, subscribing, sharing, and hyping the video really help me. Do so if you'd like and can support me further. You can become a channel member, which is less than 5 Rs, and you help me keep working here. Plus, you get early access to videos and exclusive videos like the ones you see on the screen. You can support me by using the affiliate links in the pinned comment or by making a purchase through the Amazon link. And a part goes to me, without 2.5 men, speaking of 2.5 men. After Merlin makes a deal with Pendragon, Merlin turns Uther into the Duke of Cornwall. They go to the Duke's castle. Uther sleeps with Igraine, resulting in King Arthur's birth. Then, during that same battle, which was still happening because of Uther and the Duke of Cornwall, the Duke ended up dying and Igraine ended up marrying Uther. And right after King Arthur was born, he was handed over to Merlin. And do you think Merlin raised him? Of course not. He outsourced that and gave him to another guy, a man named Hector. But Uther soon became very sick again. And this time Merlin couldn't help. He just told Uther not to worry, because Arthur would be as great a king as he was, but there was a problem. King Arthur wasn't known as King Arthur yet. He was just called Arthur. So Merlin needed somehow to make that mischievous little boy become a king. And so he went there and placed a stone in a courtyard, right there in an open area. A sword was placed in that stone, and he wrote on it that whoever pulled that sword from the stone would be the king of all England. A festival was also held, calling the greatest knights to that region to see if anyone could pull the sword from the stone. Many tried, but none succeeded. But not too far from there, Sir Hector was heading out on an adventure with his son, Sir Kay, and Sir Kay's squire, who was Arthur. But apparently, Sir Kay had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder back then. He forgot his sword and told Arthur, "Go get my sword, or I'll find another one." Arthur happily explored until he saw a sword in a stone. He pulled it out easily, not reading the writing on the stone. I don't know why he didn't read it, but he didn't. And he went back and handed it to Sir Kay, acting like nothing happened. He looked at it, realized that sword was the one from the stone, turned to his father and said, "Hey Dad, maybe I'm the king, huh? Maybe I'm the king because Arthur brought me the sword that was in the stone, so I'm the king, right?" Then Sir Hector, he looked, saw that his son was a scoundrel, a rascal, and said, "No, Arthur was the one who got it. That's him." Sir Kay looked at Arthur and said, "No, it can't be. Was it really him, Arthur?" And it was confirmed. Then the 3 of them ended up going back to where the sword was. There in the stone, they stuck it back in, and everyone there stopped to watch. Sir Kay tried to pull it. Sir Hector did too. Several other knights tried again, and no one could do it. Then Arthur went there, pulled it out again, and in fact, he was declared the new king of England. But there's nothing about this sword that makes us feel it's ours or think, what an amazing sword. Depending on the Arthur story version, the sword isn't always called Excalibur, so I didn't use that name here. The greatest feat of King Arthur with it might be in the battle where some kings there didn't accept Arthur as king. They didn't know he had noble blood and assumed he was Sir Hector's son, which sparked a huge battle. During it, King Arthur drew the sword, raised it, and it shone brighter than the sun. That phrase, taken out of context, sounds odd. They say King Arthur defeated about 200 men alone with the sword from the stone. However, as I mentioned, the sword wasn't truly magical. And in a battle against King Pellinore, who, by the way, is the father of some of the strongest knights of the Round Table, like Lamorak and Percival, King Arthur's sword broke in two, and he was shocked before Pellinore beat him up. He survived only because Merlin was there. So Merlin realized that King Arthur might not be that good in combat after all, and he needed a new sword. Or rather, actually, he needed some magical artifact that would keep him from dying in battle. Merlin put King Arthur on a horse and took him to a hermitage where a healer treated Arthur's wounds. Then they left together on another horse. Along the way, Arthur kept bothering Merlin, saying that he didn't have a sword, and Merlin told Arthur not to worry because his new sword was nearby. And they kept riding until they reached a beautiful lake where Arthur saw a very strange scene. A hand emerged from the lake holding a sword and scabbard. Arthur naturally found it odd. An arm appeared out of nowhere in the water. Then Merlin told him that the arm was actually a gift. Well, not the arm itself, right? However, the Lady of the Lake would soon visit and present him with the sword and scabbard, so he should treat her with respect. Soon she appeared over the waters in the name of Jesus Christ, the Lady of the Lake. She told King Arthur to approach the arm and take the sword and scabbard. He did so easily, then turned and saw a huge pavilion. He asked the Lady of the Lake about it, and she said it was King Pellinore's pavilion, who had wounded King Arthur. As King Arthur drew his sword to approach the pavilion, the Lady of the Lake stopped him, saying Pellinore was not there. Back to Merlin, he asked King Arthur the following: what did he think was better, the sword or the scabbard? King Arthur, of course, said it would be the sword. Then Merlin approached King Arthur. He insulted him repeatedly, calling him an ass, stupid, incompetent, ignorant, and foolish, according to the book. He joked that he didn't say more, and that the best choice would be the scabbard, because with the scabbard, King Arthur would never bleed to death in battle. I'm using Le Morte d'Arthur by Thomas Mallory for this video. This may be the most complete book of King Arthur's tales, covering his life from birth to death. If you're interested in seeing the full tale of Arthur, I'll leave the video in the pinned comment, or it will be showing up on the screen or in the description. Just click and buy, and you'll be helping me out as well. King Arthur kept that sword until his story ended, facing trouble when he forgot Merlin's advice, reminding him to look after the scabbard since he once forgot it. Morgana Le Fay, King Arthur's powerful archenemy, discovered the scabbard's story and secretly took it without him noticing. How he didn't notice, we don't know exactly, but anyway, she asked one of her sorceresses to take this scabbard to a warrior who stayed near a well. The warrior's name was Accolon, and she told him to get ready because as soon as a warrior appeared, he should fight him and didn't need to worry, because this scabbard would protect him in every possible way. Well then, King Arthur ended up showing up there, and Accolon ended up challenging him to a battle. King Arthur, having great confidence in Excalibur, accepted it willingly. That's how knight fights happen in Arthurian tales. Both mount horses, grab lances, and charge each other. Whoever gets pushed and falls to the ground loses, and that's exactly what happened. Accolon and King Arthur got on their respective horses, took their lances, and charged at each other. But King Arthur's lance broke and he fell. As soon as he hit the ground, he drew his sword, and Accolon did the same. The two fought, and King Arthur did surprisingly well. He wounded Accolon several times, but realized Accolon wouldn't fall no matter what. Worse, King Arthur grew very tired, until one of the women who worked for the queen, Guinevere, who was King Arthur's wife, went to warn him that the scabbard was missing. When King Arthur heard this, he started getting ready to get the scabbard back. He realized Accolon had it, got it back, and defeated the other knight. But when the scabbard was stolen again, There wasn't much he could do. Morgana Le Fay once again managed to steal the scabbard, and this time King Arthur was far from the kingdom. It's not exactly known what he was doing. It really depends on the truth. Some say he was searching for the Holy Grail, while others claim he was campaigning against Lucius and the Roman army. But in the middle of this journey, King Arthur ended up having a surprise. He found out that Mordor, one of the knights of the Round Table, who, in some versions, is even King Arthur's son. His nephew seized the kingdom of Britannia and, in a sense, married both Queen Guinevere and Arthur. He returns to his kingdom, confronts Mordor with the scabbard for protection, and the battle is incredible. They hit each other several times, and some accounts say King Arthur used a spear. However, Mordor doesn't die immediately and manages to strike King Arthur's head. Arthur is taken to Avalon to be cared for, and some stories say he will one day return to reign again. Well, the next magic sword here doesn't belong to King Arthur, but to Balin, also known as the Knight of Two Swords. Some stories claim he was a knight imprisoned in Arthur's kingdom, while others say he was a poor man passing by who was chosen by the magic sword. In one version, a mysterious woman came to King Arthur's court fully covered. But when she removed part of her clothing, she revealed a sword that was in a scabbard. And she said that this sword was destined for the bravest of all the knights. Because the Round Table was present, King Arthur declared that any brave knight for the sword should step forward. Everyone tried to pull out the sword, but no one succeeded. The lady grew very sad and got ready to leave. As she descended King Arthur's palace stairs, a filthy, poorly dressed man appeared nearby, and he asked what that scabbard she was holding was. Then the woman replied that it was a sword destined for the bravest knight of all. The man asked to pull out the sword, but the woman refused, saying he wasn't a knight. The young man then said that the woman didn't need to worry, because in that case, he surely wouldn't be able to pull out that sword. The lady then let him try, and to her surprise, he managed to pull the sword out of the scabbard. This man was known as Balin, the Savage. The lady then looked at Balin extremely sad, saying that that sword carried a curse, that he would end up dying in a battle against his best friend. And sometime later, the Lady of the Lake appears at King Arthur's court, asking him for Balin's head as payment for the sword she had given to King Arthur. Back at the lake, apparently, there was some kind of feud between the Lady of the Lake and Balin's family. And when Balin heard that the Lady of the Lake was at the court, he went there and right in front of King Arthur himself, cut off the Lady of the Lake's head using the sword. From then on, Balin had to flee as King Arthur would imprison him. During his escape, he fights and defeats a lesser knight of the Round Table. He takes the sword from the knight, earning the title Knight of the Two Swords. Well, but then Merlin also ends up revealing that the maiden who had brought the sword to the court was actually a traitor. She was seeking revenge for the death of her lover, and with the help of the Lady of the Lake, she created a cursed sword meant to make its bearer kill his own brother. Merlin explains the sword's origin, purpose, and its curse. Balin goes on quite a journey, and after that, he even ends up in a kingdom where the Spear of Destiny is present. This is King Palan's kingdom, and midway through, Palan pursues Balin. Balin runs away from there in desperation because he didn't have a sword at the moment, and then he ends up finding the Spear of Destiny, which he uses to wound the king. But as soon as he does that, the entire castle collapses. But Balin ends up escaping alive, and the whole story comes to a close at a certain moment. When Balin is entering a new kingdom, he sees an unknown knight and fights against him, and both end up mortally wounding each other. In the end, Balin learns the knight he killed, who also killed him, was his brother Balin. Well, the next sword here is a sword that was stuck in a floating red stone, which, according to what was written on it, was destined for the best knight in the world. Not King Arthur, Balin, or even Lancelot. This knight would be the top knight in the third part of King Arthur's book, since the best knight changes depending on the section. First is King Arthur, then Lancelot, and finally Galahad, Lancelot's son. But Galahad was created, let's say, through a trap set for Lancelot. He believed he'd be with Guinevere, whom he deeply loved and who was King Arthur's wife. That's when things began to go wrong. But anyway, a woman named Elaine ends up tricking Lancelot into sleeping with her, pretending to be Guinevere. Galahad, besides being very good in combat, is also said to have been very handsome. In fact, there's a very strange scene in the book. When Galahad is 15 years old, a guy there who's going to kind of make him a knight ends up saying that he's never seen a boy with a body as perfect as his. That part is really weird anyway. After Galahad becomes a knight, he ends up sitting in a dangerous seat, which was the only seat at the round table. They say no one could sit in it because it was meant for the greatest knight ever. As soon as Galahad sits there, people start calling everyone to leave the castle because something very strange had appeared in the lake nearby. A red stone was floating with a sword stuck in it. It was saying that it was destined for the greatest knight in the world. So everyone starts to get scared and several famous knights begin to try to pull out the sword. Gawain, Selodi, Percival, and even King Arthur have tried, but none can move it. The sword responds not just to strength, but to purity and destiny. King Arthur, recalling past omens and Balin's mistake with the sacred spear, forbids any more attempts to pull out the sword. The sword must remain untouched until the destined knight arrives. Soon after, Galahad, Lancelot's son, appears. Without effort and without challenges, Galahad grabs the hilt of the sword and pulls it from the stone as if it had been waiting for him. There were no thunderclaps or earthquakes, only silence and reverence, because Galahad was also destined to find the Holy Grail. In Thomas Mullery's tale, this sword is actually the same one that belonged to Balin, but here it no longer has any curse. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, share it, and rate it as well. I'll see you next time.